Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fourth instructional video. You guys did a great job in finishing up our first full week of online learning. You guys are doing great. I've had a really good time being in contact with you all, seeing the work that you guys have turned in, and hearing the questions that you have. You guys are doing really well working independently and working from home, even though it might be challenging. So I hope you guys take some time to rest this weekend and also to congratulate yourselves for doing such a great job. A couple of updates before I begin my little instruction video. One, today our Mini-QPA 1 is being posted. So today I'm doing a quick review video so that you guys can feel comfortable finishing that packet. Secondly, this Monday, I will be posting Mini-QPA 2, which is everything we've been learning about correlation and how to identify and describe features of a scatter plot. And I just want to point out that this is definitely what I will be putting into your grades, and so do your best. And also, I'm always available for questions. Thank you and shout out to those who joined me for my live session yesterday. It was really nice chatting with you all. For those who weren't able to join, the link to that live stream is on Google Classroom and on my YouTube channel. So make sure to check it out because I do go over some important information and I have timestamps for you guys to check out. Okay, that's it for me. So for today, I am doing a review session, so you don't necessarily have to take notes with me. So just follow along through the video. I do have a PDF of my notes on Google Classroom, so you guys can reference that and look at that in the future. Okay, so let's just take a moment. I'm going to share my screen and let's begin. Okay, so today is March 27th. We are beginning lesson 4. Our objective for today is to demonstrate mastery on Mini-QPA 1. All right, so it's not the same Mini-QPA 1 that we did right before school closed. I modified it so that you guys can do it at home by yourselves. So basically, you want to go over independent and dependent variable and to compare and contrast categorical and quantitative data. So I will be going over these 4 vocab words, all right? So keep that in mind. You want to be able to understand what these 4 things are, and you should be pretty much set for Mini-QPA 1. Now, before I begin, kind of talking about independent and dependent variable, I want to talk about the vocab variable, right? Variables are one of the most interesting things in math because it takes on a lot of different meanings and a lot of shapes and forms, but it's very much the same thing. In this case, you want to think about a variable as like the things or factors we are studying or comparing on our scatter plots. Okay, so when I'm talking about variables in this case, usually people think of it as an unknown number, like an unknown number represented by a letter. And this is still the case. We still represent our variables with X and Y, basically. That's usually what we represent it with. But I want you guys to know that when I say variable, I'm also talking about the things or factors that we're studying or comparing on our scatter plots. So when I ask for what the variable is not just a letter, but it might be an actual name or object, or it's something that we're studying, something that we're comparing. So keep that in mind. So when I say independent and dependent variable, I'm actually talking about actual things to, like, in this case, we're gonna talk about height and weight. And the numbers that we collect that are unknown are gonna be measurements of height and measurements of weight, okay? But how do we tell which one between height or weight is independent or dependent. The way I like to think of it, and this is something I said in class before, is that for an independent variable, it basically changes, or you can think of it as it affects the dependent variable. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So let's look at height and weight. And this scatter plot is talking about the height and weight of children. So we're talking about young children. Every one of these data points, we can say that the individuals, so you can say data points or the individuals for this scatter plot or study are each child. So we're saying that each dot is a data point or information about one person or one child. So there's a lot, right? You can see that there's many data points that we found. So for each child, we measured their height and their weight. Now, there are different ways we can understand this. You could do this just like conceptually, right? So usually if we're thinking about weight and height, which one changes what? Does height change weight or does weight change height? In this case, you want to pause for a second and think about what changes what. Does height change weight or does weight change height? So does height change weight or does weight change height? Pause and think of the answer in your head. Let me give you a moment to think. Yeah, in this case, height changes weight, right? Oops, I deleted that. Basically, depending on how tall you are, that usually affects your weight. Your weight doesn't make you grow taller or make you grow shorter. Usually if you're taller, we assume that you weigh more. If you're shorter, that you weigh less. So in this case, our height is our independent variable and our weight is our dependent variable. Now, another thing to note is our independent variable is our x value and our dependent variable is our y value. And you can notice that here, right? What do you notice? Our height is actually, let me do a different color. Our height is actually on the x-axis, right? It's on the x-axis. And our weight is on our y. So when I'm asking, let me make that a little bit prettier. When I'm asking for the independent variable, let me make that green again. I'm talking about height, right? I'm talking about height. And when I'm talking about my dependent variable, it's gonna be on the y, right? Which is our dependent variable. So these are the two things that you can identify: independent, dependent variable. Independent is our x, or the thing that changes the dependent. Our dependent is our y value, or what it's a thing that is affected by, or it depends on our x values, our independent variable. Another key thing I did mention briefly that you will need to understand is you need to understand what the data points are talking about. So you need to understand that in this case, every dot, every point, right? Every point here, it represents something. It represents an individual and it represents a data point about something. So we know that our dependent variable is weight, our independent is height, but what are our data points? It's from children, right? So you want to think about those three things. Is always ask yourself, let me make a star, use some pretty, ask yourself, right? What's your independent? What's your dependent? And 3, who are your individual? What do your data points represent, right? You want to ask yourself these things. All right, so let's turn to the next page. Now, what we want to talk about is we are collecting data on certain individuals. We know we're studying about these individuals, the independent, dependent variable. Now, what kind of data are we collecting? For scatter plots, we want to work with quantitative data. So for scatter plots, we use data that we can measure. And this is the most important thing, is that we are able to measure our data, okay? So quantitative data are things like age, time, like height, weight, and things that we can count and measure, okay? Whereas categorical data is things that are groups. They're like groups of things. So like yes or no questions, gender, colors, favorite flower. Is when you're looking at a group of things or like a type of things. If your answer is a number, that means it's quantitative. If your answer is a word, it's typically categorical, okay? So that's a good way, a key way of remembering what is categorical and quantitative. So if the answer, if I ask like, what's your age? You're like, my age is like 102 years old, then that's a number, right? So that's quantitative. But if I ask like, what's your favorite month? And I said October, like that is a word. So that's categorical. That's a type of thing. Like months is a group of some things, right? So keep that in mind. Remember, right, for scatter plots, we only work with quantitative data. So you want to just focus on that. So I'm going to do a practice problem. It's very similar to what we're doing for our Mini-QPA 1, and it should probably hopefully help you kind of understand some things a little bit better. Now, so this is a data on a couple of players, basketball players, right? And we talk about the player names, and then we have our free throw percentage, our assist, and what class they are. So these are high school basketball players, right? So I'm gonna first ask, what are the individuals in this data set? Is it basketball players? Is it basketball scores or basketball games? So what I mean by that is if I was to make a graph, right? What are each of these points? Who are our individuals? Who are we collecting data from? Who are we collecting data from? Are we collecting data from players, basketball scores, or basketball games? In this case, we're collecting data from each player, right? So our answer is actually going to be basketball players. Those are our individuals. That's who we are collecting data from. When I ask about individuals, I'm asking about who are we collecting data from, or what are we collecting data from. And then this asks me, what does data set contains? Does it contain 3 variables, one of which is quantitative? Does it contain 3 variables, 2 of which are quantitative? 5, 1 of which is quantitative, or 5, which 2 are quantitative? So when I'm talking about variables, what am I asking about? I am asking, wait, what are we studying? What kind of data are we collecting? Data, let me write that again. What data are we collecting? Okay. So in this case, right, we're collecting data on free throw percentage, assist, and the type of class, like what grade these students are in. So how many variables are that? That's 1, 2, and 3. So we know that it can't be C or D. It's either A or B because that's 3 variables. Now we got to ask ourselves, is one of them quantitative or 2 of them quantitative? So once again, quantitative means things that we can measure or the answers are in numbers, right? So in this case, free throw percentage is something we can measure. Assist is a number that we're measuring. Whereas class is categorical because our answers are words and we can't really measure like your grade, right? You're either a junior or you're either a senior, right? If there's only one answer to each data point, then obviously it's not something we can measure, or the possibility of it is only one, then it's not quantitative. So we know that actually there are 2 out of the 3 variables are quantitative, so our answer is B. Okay. So I can understand this might be a little bit confusing, but I always want you to think about these questions, right? When I'm talking about individuals, who are we collecting data from? If we're talking about variables, right, what data are we collecting? Typically, you just want to be able to count, right? How many things we're comparing, that's your variables. And then you want to ask yourself, which of them are we measuring? Because when we're measuring, it's our quantitative data. So this is what our Mini-QPA looks like, right? Our learning targets are that you are able to identify independent dependent variables and compare and contrast quantitative and categorical data. So this is what I just went over. Our competency is lead inquiry, so you can use tools, technologies, or models to identify and explain important relationships in your data set. And you are representing data on a scatter plot. That's your content standard. The first question is asking you to circle or highlight your topic. So you want to pick either A, B, C, or D. Just highlight that or circle that. And based on that, you're going to identify what is your independent variable and dependent variable. All right. And you write your answer down here. Number 3, you're basically labeling, right, out of whatever you put down here, an independent, dependent, you're gonna tell me, is it X or Y, which you guys should figure out. What kind of data can you show on a scatter plot? Is it categorical or quantitative? You also know this based on our video. You're gonna circle your answer. And I give you a question where Rachel gives a survey to her classmates about their superstitions, like do they read the horoscope or not? And here's some of the data that collected. For number 5A, you want to tell me who the individuals are. So if I'm talking about individuals, remember, if you look back here, right, who are we collecting data from? And then if I'm talking about variables, what data are we collecting? So keep that in mind as we move forward. You want to answer up to 5C. And that's it. That's it. That's all you got to do for today. So make sure that you guys, for your to-do today, review concepts by watching this video like one more time so you kind of understand what I'm saying. Look at your practice problems for your previous packets and then complete Mini-QPA 1, preferably on the computer, and then turn that in. And that's it for today. You guys have the weekend and just get ready for Mini-QPA 2. Well, hopefully you guys, this lesson was easy to understand. If it is confusing, please comment below on Google Classroom or message me and email me. I'm always available. But yeah, hopefully math was impossibly easy. I hope you have a great day and weekend.